To football talks about his passion for the game.
Interesting. Very interesting. 1-0. No, it's not. Oh, what a great goal. The place has gone absolutely mad. Oh, and that's a screamer. Brilliant, brilliant. Goal, goal, goal. Brazil.
And stuffed with stats.
Well, that would have been the first hat-trick in an FA Cup semi-final since 1958.
But there's a corner in every British home that's forever motty, where he's left a voice imprint like a ghost in the carpet. His own home houses his library. It's where those facts and stats live, in leather-bound books and piles of programmes.
When I moved house about 5 years ago, I realised how much memorabilia I'd collected down the years of being a fan and then being a commentator, and it was in a bit of a mess, to be honest. It was all over the place, and there were books here and files there and programmes lining the corner. So when we moved house, I decided to have an office furniture company come and give me a quote for fitting out a room to accommodate all this stuff. Certainly not saying it's perfect, it's far from it, but at least it is all in one place, and I can walk in here and know that any reference I want to make, I can get there fairly quickly.
A little Jackie Moody. Now there is Nat Lothouse, the footballer of the year.
I suppose the first football match, first cup final I ever really remember seeing was the 1953 Matthews final. This was coronation year. A lot of people only got their first telly that year. But a little black and white set, 9-inch set, in this house in Deptford, and we watched the Blackpool-Bolton final.
Holden, a lovely chance for Moore. It's gone through to Hassel. Lothouse. It's a goal!
I've never thought about it since, until now really, but I suppose that must have left an impression on me, because that was the first time I'd realised that the drama of football, which, you know, I was lucky enough to be taken to the real thing, but the drama of football could come across through the television screen.
By our watch, 2.5 minutes to go. Bolton 3, Blackpool 2. There he is. It's a lovely goal.
You've come some amazing games during the course of your career. How did it all start?
Well, it started in radio really, Garth, to be honest. 30 years ago, as we speak, I think one of your other guests in this series, Ken Wolstenholme, left BBC Television to go elsewhere. And obviously David Coleman and Barry Davis were already there, and they were looking for a third commentator in the early 70s, and I was put on a year's probation, if you like, to go to television and see how I materialised, and if it didn't work out well, then I was going to go back to my old job in radio. And what really happened was that for the first 3 months I struggled really badly, and there were people saying, well, I don't think you're going to cut this at all. And then by a fluke, my first ever FA Cup tie for Match of the Day happened to be Hereford-Newcastle.
Tremendous spirit in this Hereford side. They're not giving this up by any means. Radford. Now Tudor's gone down for Newcastle. Radford again. Oh, what a goal! What a goal! Radford the scorer. Ronnie Radford. And the crowd are invading the pitch.
That goal by Ronnie Radford, I mean, people said it was voted the goal of the season, and for me it was the goal of my career. Probably the most dramatic match I ever covered would be 1982 World Cup. I believe you were there, Garth, when Brazil played Italy in the small stadium in Barcelona. Okay. And Paolo Rossi got his hat-trick and Brazil were eliminated. And that was such a dramatic game, and we were so close to the pitch that it was like being with your face pressed against the window and seeing something that was going to be with you for the rest of your life. It was the ultimate sort of sweet shop as far as a football fan was concerned, because there were so many great players on the shelf, and they produced a game that you couldn't have written if it was fiction. And I always remember the game because Bobby Charlton was my co-commentator, and he was in tears at the end of the match.
But Gomi is up there, shot by Tardelli, and it's been turned in. Paolo Rossi was there again. Unbelievable. It's 3-2 to Italy.
I always remember in the last minute of the game, it was 3-2 to Italy, and Brazil would have gone through if they'd drawn, because it was a league basis. And Brazil got a free kick, it was right in front of us, and Eder, the outside left, took it and floated it to the far post, and Oscar, the big centre-back, had a header, and Dino Zoff, who was in goal for Italy, fell on the ball, and it was right on the line. It was an inch away from putting Brazil through.
And coming in at the back, Oscar came in, and Zoff hangs on, and the referee says no goal.
And Italy went through, and the final whistle went then. And as the players came off the pitch, there were some players in tears, there were some players embracing each other, there were some players flat on the ground, and it was one of those occasions where you thought, well, how can I possibly sum this up? And somebody in London made the decision for me, because it was 20-6 at the time, English time, and they said, hand back to England for the news. And I thought, well, this is the news, you know, what could be bigger than what I've just watched? And it was the most sort of truncated summary I'd ever done in my life. I said, well, there you are, Brazil are out of the World Cup. And then they played the news bulletin. I mean, I'll never forget that.
Do you ever feel, having relayed that story, that you've really been robbed of the moment?
Yeah, I think the freedom I had with, say, English Cup finals, when we were live with no particular time impediment, was easier. I mean, I remember if there was a game that would have come near to the one we've just been talking about, it would have been the one when, as you well know, when Tottenham won the FA Cup on the Thursday night against Manchester City. And people talk about Ricky Villa's goal, you know, as the greatest goal in a cup final. I mean, they forget Steve McKenzie scored a great goal.
Ranson with the kick. Miller, Reeves underneath it. And now Hutchison to McKenzie. Oh, tremendous goal! Steve McKenzie. Fabulous shot.
And you scored one where I think you just almost took it off the toe end of Steve Archibald.
So he claims.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I shouted crooks and hoped I was right.
Model. Oh, the chance here for Archibald. Crooks. Amazing. He just played a brilliant stop ball in there. It slowed up for them, and Crooks scores.
That was a magical night as well, because there hadn't been a Wembley replay before, and it was a fabulous game. I mean, I don't know what it was like to play, and you do, but to commentate on it was a great match, and I would pick that out as one of probably the best cup final I ever saw.
Villa. And still Ricky Villa. What a fantastic run. He scored. Amazing goal. And look what happened here. The big man from Argentina went round 1, 2, 3. Joe Corrigan came to block, and Villa squeezed it in.
The cup final between Spurs and Coventry was special for all sorts of reasons. But what do you remember about it?
Best football match of any Wembley final I've commentated on. It was a fantastic game. Both teams just came out and played football. They didn't show any fear. And so we got a really exciting cup final. I still think Houchin's goal in the 87 final is the best goal I've seen at Wembley.
Houchin! Brilliant goal! Keith Houchin, the man with the Midas touch in the FA Cup, strikes goal for Coventry. A wonderful header.
Because of the way he started the move, and that Reed just got it out to Bennett, and then the cross came in and Houchin scored with that thrilling diving header. And I remember the goal for another reason, because Jimmy Hill in those days was my co-commentator before Trevor. And of course, Jimmy Hill had strong associations with Coventry, so I mean there was a question mark as to whether he really was unbiased on this particular day. And I always remember when Houchin threw himself forward and headed the ball in the net, Jimmy threw himself up out of his seat and knocked all the notes all over the place and screamed goal from the commentary box. So it was quite an emotional moment.
Houchin! Brilliant goal!
One of the games that probably will be remembered as a Motti classic will be the game between Wimbledon and Liverpool, when the Minnows take on the Giants. How does Motti stay calm in all of that?
On the previous Tuesday before that cup final, I'd been into the BBC, and we'd had our usual pre-cup final meeting, and there were about 30 or 40 people in the room. And I still don't know why I did it. I said, how many people think Wimbledon have got a chance of winning the cup final? And not one hand went up. And I thought, this is spooky, because I'd never been preparing for a cup final before with such an apparently obvious result. So on the Tuesday night, my wife was out and I was just doing a bit of last-minute preparation, and I rang Dave Besant, the Wimbledon goalkeeper, at home, because I knew him, just to ask him. I said, and the really reason I rang was just to say, well, what do Wimbledon feel about this? Because everybody else in the country thinks you're going to get beat about 4 or 5-0. Anyway, we talked for a while, and I said, and at the time Aldridge was taking penalties with a somewhat of a controversial run-up. He kept pausing in his run and then shuffling, and then... So I said to Besant, have you thought what might happen if Aldridge takes a penalty on Saturday? And Dave said, well, I know exactly what will happen. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, he'll start to run up and he'll check his stride. He said, and then I'll dive to my left, because that's where he'll put it. So he'd obviously done his homework. So when Aldridge went down, there were about 5 things for me to deal with. First of all, it was a poor decision by Brian Hill, who was a good referee, actually. But Goodyear took the ball. It wasn't a penalty, but Liverpool got the luck of the draw. And whatever they say about that cup final, they had the luck there and didn't take it. Aldridge was the penalty taker, but his number was being... They were preparing to take him off and substitute him over... I saw that happening as well, and I thought, what... And then I had to get in the fact, well, I think Dave Besant knows what he's going to do here. Well, of course, Aldridge did take the penalty, and Besant did save it, and he was the first goalkeeper ever to save one in a cup final.
There is Aldridge, Beardsley. Well, he might score here. Penalty. Goodyear on Aldridge. Wimbledon protest at the decision. And never has a penalty been missed in the FA Cup final at Wembley. Well, Besant thinks that, or thought the kick might go to his left or the right as we look, if Aldridge decides to go the same way as in the semi-final. He did, and he saved it, and made history. And Besant did guess right. His homework paid off, and Wimbledon are still in the lead.
I remember John Motson commentating on a game between France and Portugal in the European Championships. I know in the department I've heard people say that was Motti at his best, or indeed his most excitable.
Hysterical, I think.
Do you remember the game?
It was hysterical, yeah, I was over the top there.
It was a wonderful commentary.
It was a fantastic match. You had to be at the game. I would put it probably on a parallel with the Brazil-Italy game we talked about earlier. Portugal against France in the semi-final of '84. Where Portugal led 2-1. France took the game into extra time, and in the last minute of extra time, it was in Marseille, the game, Platini scored the winning goal, and he'd scored in every match in that European Championship, and it was such a climax. And yeah, I wouldn't say I've been accused of screaming too often, but that was definitely one occasion when I did.
I think the commentary was almost as excitable as the game itself.
Well, maybe it should be in a sense, because I think your tone of voice, if there is a skill in commentary, I think getting the sense of occasion across is probably the most important task you've got, because that's the one thing the viewer at home can't appreciate simply because he or she isn't there. So you can do what you like about talking about the players, about the way the game's going, all that people can quite sometimes reasonably say I can see for myself. But what they can't feel is that tingle you get when you're in the ground. And that's, I think, what commentators generally are trying to, if they can, to communicate.
One of the things that is almost as famous as the man is the sheepskin coat. Have you still got it?
I have got a sheepskin coat, but it's not the same one anymore, because the one I had went to an exhibition, believe it or not, some strange football memorabilia. Yes. I think it must have walked there itself, because I'd had it so long. I didn't when I started in television, the other commentators all had sheepskin jackets, half length, and I just happened to tumble across a chap in Essex who made full-length sheepskin coats. He had the skins in his garage, and he came and measured you up, and you had a proper coat to fit you. And a few people I know went to him, but unfortunately, about 3 or 4 years ago, this gentleman not only went out of business, he totally disappeared. I couldn't track him down anywhere. So whether his sheepskin coats were a cover for something else, I'm sure it wasn't that. But anyway, I'm now on the one I had is now on its last legs, and what I'm going to do when that one wears out, I'm still awaiting development, so I'm trying to find somebody somewhere who makes them.
I remember a wonderful shot of you covered in snow.
Yeah, this was a freak storm at Wickham. I went to a game, I left my home 40 minutes away from Wickham in bright sunshine. I drove to them the M40. I turned off at the big roundabout. It was a lovely sunny day, December, second round of the FA Cup, Wickham-Peterborough. And I had to get there at lunchtime to interview Martin O'Neill, who was then the Wickham manager, live on the pitch. And as I drove down that hill into Wickham, a local storm, and I mean local, it only happened within a 2-mile radius, snowstorm started, and within seconds the pitch was covered. You wouldn't have believed it. 4 or 5 miles away they were playing at other grounds in the afternoon. And I stood on the pitch waiting for Martin O'Neill, and he was there, and we were about to start the interview, and the referee arrived and said, well, we can't play, the game's off. So I stood in the middle of the pitch with my sheepskin coat on, looking at the camera, thinking, well, there's no point about interviewing Martin O'Neill about a match that isn't going to happen. And Grandstand said, well, stand there and we'll join you and you can tell us the reason for this unexpected postponement. So I stood on the, not knowing, by the way, that somebody had crept the other side of our camera with an ordinary photographer's camera and took this picture of me in the sheepskin coat with the snow coming. And of course my piece for Grandstand is also, sadly for me, in quotes, immortalised by being used every so often. And that was the day at Wickham in the snow.
Well, I'm afraid that Mark West and Martin O'Neill are going to have to wait a few days longer if they're going to add another chapter to Wickham's famous Cup history, because as you can see, this part of Buckinghamshire is absolutely snowbound, and there's a bit of a gale hurtling around me now as well. The referee, Jimmy Borrett from Suffolk, decided that the safety of the players and the spectators would be threatened, and also he was concerned about lack of markings on the pitch.
Another humorous moment was at Derby County, the baseball ground. Very muddy in those days, and there was no penalty spot.
No, it was extraordinary, because I was caught out that day because the referee gave a penalty to Derby. It was Jerry Daly was going to take this penalty. He took the ball to where he thought the penalty spot was, and the ground was so, it was like a ploughed field then, the baseball. It was so churned up they couldn't find the spot. And Joe Corrigan, of course, wanted to delay the kick anyway, so he came out and made a fuss. And suddenly there was a lot of a commotion, and from the far side of the pitch there comes a little fella with a pot of paint. And it was the groundsman, Bob Smith. I'm sitting in the commentary box thinking, I don't believe this. I can't believe that we're going to have the penalty spot painted while everybody waits.
And this is extraordinary. We're going to see the penalty spot painted, are we, during the match? Meantime, Colin Bolton is, I think, building a sandcastle. Jerry Daly is waiting to score what he hopes will be the 4th goal, but before he can take the penalty, here's the tape measure, and here's the pot of paint. Well, this is extraordinary. Certainly some football history being made here. I'm sure the penalty spot has never been painted during a First Division match before. Well, who's been unsettled by that?
I've never seen that happen before in a football game, and it actually took place on Match of the Day.
The World Cup, the greatest football festival in the world. But all the ones that you've commentated on, is the one that really stands out?
Well, we arrived at the Stade de France for the final this year and got into our commentary position as usual about an hour before the kick-off. And suddenly the team, because of course at the World Cup it's a bit different to our working here. You're not allowed downstairs in the dressing room corridor. You have to wait for the sheets to be brought up to the waiting media. And we got the Brazilian team sheet with no Ronaldo.
Let's go inside the stadium. John Motson's our match commentator for the final. There he is with Trevor Brooking, of course. What do you make of it all, John?
Desmond, I've never had anything like this in my career. The scenes in the commentary boxes for the last 45 minutes have been absolute mayhem and chaos, because the first sheet which you showed, which allegedly now is wrong, which said that Ronaldo would not play, came up into the commentary boxes about 40 minutes ago, and the response was incredible. There were journalists and commentators racing around trying to find out the truth behind it.
It was as though somebody had just made a fundamental announcement about world peace or something. I mean, there was chaos in the commentary area. And then, of course, it was made worse by the fact that just as everybody was telling their producers and their editors, we've got the biggest story of the World Cup, Ronaldo's out, we don't quite know why, suddenly another sheet comes up saying Ronaldo has had treatment in hospital and he's now at the stadium, and in a minute there will be another team announcement, which there was, and of course he was back in the team. Well, every national broadcasting organisation suddenly wanted an explanation from their commentator, and were coming over live with pictures, ourselves included.
And the latest rumour, just to add fuel to the fire, is that there must be some sort of argument going on in the dressing room, which may ultimately explain the chaos of the last 45 minutes. But join us again for the match, Des.
To do that piece to camera and then to sort of get the sense of it across, and then to sort of think about doing the match afterwards, made it a completely unique occasion. And more people, since I came back from the World Cup, more people have spoken to me about that particular issue than they've ever done about the game itself. It overshadowed the final.
When you're actually watching the game from the commentary box, how do you find the right emotion for the right moment?
Well, the point about commentary is I think it's a good and a bad thing, really, Garth. It is the only discipline I know in television where you are going to be doing effectively an hour and a half or 2 hours of live broadcasting without a script. All I've got written down are the names of the players, a few facts about them that I've just tried to commit to memory. Perhaps the first 20 or 30 seconds that I'm going to introduce the game when Desmond Lynam hands to me, I would think about that, because the worst thing you want to do is stumble the first few words. But the rest of it is absolutely and entirely off the top of my head. I mean, I have to react to what happens on the pitch, and there's no way that you can prepare or predict that.
Oh, look at that. Marvellous stuff. A throwback to the old days. Look at this. Oh!
Many's the time that I've played the video back afterwards and thought, well, why didn't I spot that, or why didn't I say that at that particular moment in time? And the answer is because I literally said the first thing that came into my head.
And from the fairy tale land of Denmark, they've come up here with a little goal-scoring gnome called Ronnie Eklund.
Now, John, we've all heard of the Coleman balls, the mistakes that the commentator makes. Have you made your
Yes, I've made many, Garth, and most of the ones that I've made I admit to, and other people sometimes get blamed for mine and I get blamed for theirs. But I suppose the classic one in my vocabulary would be when I got letters back in the 70s. This was actually, I got a lot of letters from a guy in the northeast from a mining village who was constantly going on about why the commentators in the affluent southeast kept talking about the colours of the shirts and the teams, because him and his son could only have a black and white set and they couldn't afford colour TV, and would we please remember that, you know, there were people that weren't as wealthy as those of us down. So So I thought, well, one day I'm going to put this right for this viewer, and I actually happened to be at Sunderland one afternoon. I thought, what a perfect opportunity. And Spurs were playing, and as they kicked off for the second half and Spurs were in their change strip, I said, for the benefit of those watching in black and white, Spurs are in the yellow shirts. And I didn't realise what I'd said until later that night when I telephoned somebody about something completely different, and they said, I'm in hysterics here. Do you realise what you've just said?
So Spurs start the second half, playing now from the left. Anybody watching in black and white, Spurs are playing in all yellow today.
I don't think I can beat that one, even if I tried.
Another match of their day on Tuesday at the same time, 2:15. Coming up on BBC Two, Jimmy White's Titanic match against Stephen Hendry in 1994. That's after the news.
People are on the pitch, they think it's all over. It is now.